Should be up. And here we are. Okay, well then. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the video on chapters 29 through 30, otherwise known as the 90s all the way up to Mr. President Obama. So, I hope you have a wonderful ride today. We'll be started with George Bush Sr. Alright. Let me see here. Right. So, Bush Sr. was more of a foreign policy president. He really wanted to focus on, the Cold War and really just trying to deal with the whole New World Order thing. So him, along with his Secretary of State Baker, Secretary of Defense Cheney, and NSA National Security Advisor Scowcraft, and General Powell, they were all trying to figure out how they were going to deal with Mr. Gorbachev. And so one thing that they decided to do was, hey, let's unite Germany. And so they did. And then soon afterwards, Gorbachev basically just got booted out of the USSR because the USSR was doing absolute shit. And so eventually Boris Yeltsin, along with a bunch of other people, helped defeat a military coup that occurred from some hardline communists, and they split up the USSR into a bunch of new republics, the largest of which is Russia. Go figure. And so, soon afterwards as well, the Chinese shut down protests at Tiananmen Square with, military force, and Bush had to kind of deal with the fact that, one, we wanted to get some fucking money from China, and two, we couldn't exactly support China shutting down a democracy protest with fucking tanks and gas. So, we'll figure it out. It'll be fine. Probably. Hopefully. So, that kind of fucked up our Chinese foreign policy. But also, Saddam Hussein went like, hey, I'm gonna invade Kuwait, motherfuckers. And so, he took a bunch of forces and said, hey, Kuwait, what's up? Kuwait opens the door, Iraq kind of walks in and starts shooting everybody on sight. And so, they took over Kuwait. And because Kuwait provides 20% of the world's oil, United States, a very oil-dependent nation, went like, those fuckers, it's time to go to Kuwait. And so, we then began on January 17th, 1991, Operation Desert Storm, otherwise known as, let's go to the Middle East and shoot some fucking guns, because we need some fucking oil. And so, after we busted in there and busted the Iraqis out of Kuwait, we went like, I don't know. Do we take over Iraq? And eventually, we were like, nah, rather not. And so, while people did want to rebel against Saddam Hussein, they were like, surely the Americans will help us. And then they got mowed down by Saddam Hussein's troops. So that didn't work out too well. And then also, the fact that we kind of staged some US troops in Saudi Arabia pissed off some people, including Osama bin Laden, who founded Al-Qaeda. Might have been a bad idea. And also, in the news of trying to overthrow dictators, Panama's dictator, Manuel Noriega, was somebody that the CIA supported because he was anti-communist. But now all the communists are fucked off and gone except for China, which isn't really the communists we're talking about. And so when his party lost the presidential election, we kind of went like, because then he proceeded to hold on to power and not really do jack shit. And so, then we invaded Panama, and then we restored the rightful presidential candidate to the presidency, because we were about to give the Panama Canal back to Panama. And we didn't want it to be in the hands of Noriega, so we just arrested him as a drug dealer, and imprisoned him in Florida. Because we're smart. Then we negotiated the NAFTA, or otherwise known as the North American Free Trade Agreement, otherwise known as, what if we just didn't tax Canada and Mexico, and they didn't tax us? Which kind of caused some controversy, because people were like, well, now they're going to take all our fucking jobs. So, yeah. A lot of mixed results, but you know. Oh, and just saying, Yugoslavia and Somalia also had some UN peacekeeping missions in there, because they were actually just blowing up in some wars and shit. I don't fucking know what that's all about, but sure. George Bush Sr. was also liked to call himself the education president, and got together and partnered up with a bunch of governors to create a thing called America 2000, an education summit, so that we could set education standards for the whole wide family. That'd be great. He also supported the Clean Air Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is fairly obvious. I mean, clean air tries to clean up air. Americans with disabilities tries to help Americans with disabilities. It's not so hard. And then he nominated 2 Supreme Court justices, one of them who turned out more liberal than we all expected, and one of them that was definitely conservative. So, yeah. One of them, the conservative one, also was accused of sexual assault, which indirectly led to more women being elected to public office, because we were pissed off about sexist people being elected or appointed to the Supreme Court. What do you know? On the issues of race, Rodney King got beat up and O.J. Simpson probably stabbed somebody, you know, causing race riots and shit. So yeah. Moving on to the economy, George Bush kind of said, read my lips, no new taxes. Here, this ad says it best, to be honest.
1988.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Then George Bush signed the second biggest tax increase in American history.
Yeah, basically. I'm actually not sure if y'all heard that. I'm sure you did. But he basically tried to say, I'm not going to put in any taxes, until he did. And so the United States was kind of getting pissed off at the fact that George Bush Sr. just dealt with foreign policy and didn't do so hot on the domestic policy. So, moving on. An up-and-coming Democrat named Bill Clinton gets elected. Surprise, surprise. There we go. So, Bill Clinton did a lot of things besides not having sexual relations with that woman. He also tried to pass a healthcare bill, which didn't happen, and he tried to be a little bit more progressive in gay rights, which just kind of resulted in don't ask, don't tell policy in the military, and then eventually signing a Defense of Marriage Act so that states didn't have to recognize gay marriage from other states. Because he was also really more conservative. He was like a weird kind of moderate Democrat. Although at this same time, Republicans are starting to become more conservative and Democrats are starting to become more liberal, which would escalate and escalate throughout the years until you live in today and one side is saying one thing and the other side is saying another thing, and you have no fucking idea how we all live together on the same fucking nation. So yeah. He also signed the Family and Medical Leave Act. Started up a Goals 2000 thing, which was the Clinton version of the America 2000 thing from earlier, which would, promote educational standards. Yeah. Also signed off on the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which forced anti-abortion groups to fuck off from the entrances of abortion clinics. Who knew? He also tried to lower the federal deficit because he thought it was dragging down the American economy, and he was probably fucking right. However, the bill that the budget that he passed pissed everybody off because it, 1, included a tax increase, and 2, did actually jack shit for federal programs. But what it did was balance the federal budget and lower federal debt, which happened. And then we got rid of a shit ton of debt. And he also eventually allied with the Republicans against some of his Democratic allies and against everybody who is like, what the fuck is this NAFTA shit, to get Congress to sign off on NAFTA. So yeah. Also, some conservative Republicans that wanted to be more conservative basically followed the lead of a guy named Newt Gingrich, who went like, hey, this president, he ain't conservative enough. We gotta do some shit about it. So yeah. He also killed off big government, supposedly, by getting rid of a shit ton of welfare. Surprise, surprise. When you want to cut down federal spending, what you gonna do? So yeah. In other news, Norway got peace in Israel between Israel and Palestine, and Yugoslavia is dying, Rwanda massacred some Tutsis, we're still bombing Iraq, and Ireland got some Good Friday Accords for, trying to have a peace in civil war-torn Ireland. But we're just kind of blasting over this because we don't care about the rest of the world, because this is U.S. history. Oh, we also did some Dayton Peace Accords in Ohio, which happened in America, so that's important. Which basically dealt with the situation happening in Bosnia. Yep. That's foreign policy for you. Terrorism's the thing now. We have McVeigh, who basically car bombed a federal building. The Columbine shooting. It's a Columbine shooting. And then the World Trade Center got bombed. So this wasn't the plane crashing into the World Trade Center. It was somebody taking a bomb in there and blowing it the fuck up. Still supported by Al-Qaeda, though. He was impeached because he supposedly did not have sexual relations with that woman. However, he was not removed. And so, but even then, the economy was doing really fucking well because technology and all sorts of shit. And so Clinton still had a relatively high approval rating because, not a shit ton of people were poor as fuck. Oh yeah, and Bush v. Gore happened in that there were a shit ton of recounts in Florida until the Supreme Court finally went like, you know what, fuck this shit. Bush, you win. So yeah. Quick note on technology. It's technology. It's the 90s. No shit. That's a weird error sound. But anyways. So, before we had Apple, Google, Microsoft, IBM, we had this group called the Homebrew Group. Yeah, the homebrew club, which consisted of a bunch of geeks that would eventually form Apple, Google, Microsoft, IBM. So yeah, basically Apple II is created, IBM makes an IBM PC that would run Windows, created by Microsoft, and then Microsoft would make an MS-DOS operating system. And then computers are now in basically everybody's hands. Then there's a Y2K scare of the January 1st, 2000, whenever everybody went like, wait, shit, guys, we programmed our computers so that they would not recognize that we were in 2000. What the fuck do we do? And so everybody flipped their shit because government technology was basing on this technology that would flip its shit at 2000, and a bunch of other home technology was based on that shit. And so, because of this, everybody in the software and computers world went like, fuck, we gotta fix this! And so they did. Boom. Yeah, basically. So now, we have the fucking internet with the World Wide Web. And I don't have to fucking tell you what that shit can do because you're currently watching this fucking stream or this fucking video off of the World Wide Web. I mean, you know what it does. I know what it does. I don't see any need to waste time on it. However, just in case you didn't know, there was a .com bubble in the early 2000s which burst. And so, people like Yahoo, Amazon, a bunch of other internet companies basically lost stock prices. And though some recovered from the .com bubble, a bunch of them did not. Oh yeah, and Google's a verb now, at this point. Already. Just end of the 90s, Google's a verb. That's just it. Also, because of shit like Napster, music is free. Basically, and newspapers are dying because nobody's gonna buy newspapers when they can just go on the fucking internet. And now, moving on to 9/11. It happened. It's pretty fucking terrible. Never forget. Bush probably didn't do it. I mean, at this point, we're moving into territory of things that we probably lived through, so I don't have to tell you exactly what the events were, but more of what we did with that shit. So, first off with 9/11, that basically inspired us to be like, hey, we're gonna go find some fucking terrorists and we're gonna kill that shit. Quick video.
Enemy
spotted. Terrorists win.
And so, we went out and we're like, we're gonna find Al-Qaeda and we're gonna find the Taliban and we gonna kill that shit. And so, we invaded Afghanistan. Because, you know, that's the way you deal with terrorist organizations. You invade the country where it happened in. And so, so after we invaded Afghanistan, we basically got rid of the Taliban, but then we didn't really do all that much to help Afghanistan. Because although the Taliban was pretty shit, we didn't actually, you know, set up good governments in Afghanistan or really support, like, an actual thing. So yeah, that might have been a little bit of a fuck up. However, in the domestic sphere, he also did No Child Left Behind. This is H.W. Bush. What was it? No, this is W. Bush. My bad. I might have been referring him to the wrong name. But this is George W. Bush, the Junior. And so his No Child Left Behind would be another education bill, which would develop clear standards and then use test results to measure whether individual schools and districts were making adequate yearly progress in improving the education of all students and closing the achievement gap. In other words, this fucker's the reason why we have to do the STAR test. So, Shit. And then he was like, okay, we're gonna cut taxes, and it's gonna be great. And we're gonna boost the economy. It's gonna be a tax holiday. And then it promptly didn't do jack shit and increased the federal deficit. So, yeah. He also pissed off conservationists by allowing drilling in the Arctic, among other things. So, yeah. That's essentially his domestic policy. Although he don't also sign the USA Patriot Act, otherwise known as the reason why the NSA and the FBI are watching your calls, watching your messages, listening to your calls, watching your webcams, catching your emails. You know. To protect us. Oh, by the way, we're still in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And, it wasn't exactly a good idea. Because we were like, hey, Iraq has nukes, I think. Probably. I don't know. And then we just kind of sent in people. And it wasn't really a smart idea. So, yeah. And as the young Obama put it, this is the dumb war. So, yeah. Whole lot of shit happened. I mean, it's just... We just went in Iraq and just made a huge fucking mess. Honestly. It's not really worth covering. Because there's a whole lot of detail about the Iraq war. But I mean, all you need to know is we went into Iraq and then we kind of fucked up a lot. You want to go on... You want to get some more details, you can go to Wikipedia. And also, Hurricane Katrina happened. Yeah. The Bush administration didn't do all too much to help it, and FEMA did absolutely jack shit to help it. So, as you might think, people were pissed the fuck off. So, yeah. Because, like, the FEMA director was, like, a guy that was just experienced in politics, and then he got a call, it's like, hey, so, are we gonna do jack shit about this hurricane? And he's like, I'm sure it's fine. We're gonna be fine. So, yeah. 2008 happened. We had a massive financial crisis because of a whole lot of shit, which essentially boils down to banks were investing too heavily in subprime mortgages, and then those prices dropped, and then the banks tried to get money back from people who owed them money, and then they couldn't, and then they failed. And so the US had to spend a shit ton of money bailing out the banks so that everybody wouldn't lose their cash all at the same time, and so that the economy would still be alive. And so, yeah. And this was also partially because we had the FDIC, otherwise known as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which kind of had to insure the banks whenever they fucked up. And so they had a massive fuck up. And we had to pay off a shit ton of money. And so we created the TARP, or Troubled Asset Relief Program, and we also just poured in a shit ton of money into banks and companies so that they wouldn't fail and the economy wouldn't commit suicide. So yeah. 2008 happened. And also, Obama was elected. That was crazy. Now then. With the election of Obama, there was also a bunch of groups like the Tea Party rising up, which went like, cut the taxes, cut the government. I don't give a fuck. And Occupy Wall Street who went like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this economy? Or not exactly, but it was like, what the fuck? There ain't no rights. Because they were basically pissed off that, 2008 happened. And so their rallying cry was, we are the 99%, which is to characterize themselves as not rich. And so Occupy Wall Street was like a liberal protest group. That's the easiest way to explain it. And then also, Obama got Obamacare passed. By the way. Just saying. And the government is now more divided than ever because Republicans and Democrats are conservative and liberal as shit and can't compromise on anything. Yeah. So, that's it. I'm done. That should be all. Alright then. Don't feel like I need to go into too much more detail because we lived through 2010 and above. So yeah. Thank you for watching. And see you next time when I probably start making economics and government videos. Have a nice fucking day.